The alarm bells rang through Station Nexus 7 like the screams of dying stars. Tae-min pressed his six-fingered hands against the cool metal of his desk and tried to make sense of the reports flooding his screen. As council speaker for the Althurian Federation, he had seen many crises in his long life. Wars between star systems, trade disputes that lasted decades, even the Great Plague that swept through the Outer Rim worlds 20 years ago. But nothing like this. They're just gone, whispered Hyunwoo as he entered the chamber. The crystalline hegemony ambassador's usual blue glow had faded to a sickly pale color. His crystal body clicked and chimed as he moved, a sound that normally brought comfort but now seemed hollow and sad. All of them. Every single human in our sector has vanished. Tae-min stood slowly, his tall frame casting shadows across the curved walls of his office. Outside the massive windows, he could see the busy docking bays of the station. Ships from dozens of worlds came and went like metal insects. But something was wrong with the pattern. Too many empty berths. Too much silence where there should have been the steady hum of human cargo vessels. How many? Tae-min asked, though he feared the answer. The mining station at Kepler 442. 40% human crew. Now they're running with just Vrex and Zephyrian workers. The Andromedus trade route. Completely shut down. Every human navigator just left. Hyunwoo's voice cracked like breaking crystal. The Iron Belt asteroid mines, the agricultural worlds in the Vega system, even the small research outposts, nobody pays attention to. Empty. Sora burst through the doors without waiting for permission. The council archivist never ran anywhere. Her people, the keepers of memory, moved with careful thought and measured steps, but now her robes flew behind her like wings as she rushed to Tae-min's desk. I've been reviewing the communications logs, she said, her breathing heavy. No distress calls, no emergency broadcasts, no political statements or demands. The humans just packed up and left. That's impossible, Tae-min said. 40 billion people don't just disappear overnight. There must be records, ship manifests, flight plans, something. Sora shook her head. Her large, dark eyes held a sadness that seemed to stretch back through generations. I found security footage from 12 different stations. The humans were calm. They loaded their personal things onto unmarked ships. They said goodbye to their alien friends and co-workers. Some even left gifts. Then they powered down their equipment, sealed their facilities, and flew away into deep space. The three of them stood in silence for a long moment. Through the station's communication system, Tae-min could hear the growing chaos in the corridors outside. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Trade ships stranded without human navigators who knew the dangerous routes through asteroid fields. Mining operations shut down because only humans were crazy enough to work in certain radiation zones. Even the black market weapons dealers were complaining that their human contacts had vanished. Call an emergency session, Tae-min said finally. All council members, now. Within 2 hours, the Great Chamber of Station Nexus 7 filled with representatives from every major species in known space. The chamber was a marvel of engineering, built to accommodate beings who breathed different atmospheres, stood at different heights, and communicated in ways that ranged from sound waves to color patterns to electromagnetic pulses. Byung-ho of the Vrex Dominion was the first to speak. His red scaled hide gleamed under the chamber lights, and his voice carried the authority of a warrior race that had conquered 17 star systems. This is clearly another human tantrum, he said with a dismissive wave of his clawed hand. Their species is known for emotional outbursts and dramatic gestures. They'll be back when they get hungry or need medical supplies. Murmurs of agreement rippled through some sections of the chamber. The humans had a reputation among the older species as being unpredictable, hot-headed, and prone to making decisions based on feelings rather than logic. But Ji-won of the Ethereal Collective rose from her place in the lower tier. Her people rarely spoke in council sessions, preferring to observe and offer wisdom only when asked. When she stood, her translucent form seemed to glow with an inner light that commanded attention. "Honored colleagues," she said, her voice like wind through crystal chimes, "I fear we are not seeing the full picture. My people have touched the edges of human consciousness for many years. They are not a species given to meaningless gestures. If they have left, they had a reason. And if they coordinated an exodus of this scale across such distances without our knowledge, we may have underestimated them greatly. Young Su, the cultural liaison who worked with species integration programs, stood next. His own people, the Harmony Builders, were known for their ability to understand and mediate between different cultures. Ji-won speaks truth, he said. I've been reviewing the integration reports. Humans were involved in more interspecies cooperation programs than any other race. They volunteered for the most dangerous jobs. They took assignments other species refused. He paused, looking down at his notes with a confused expression. They were everywhere. How did we not notice how much they were doing? Dong-su, who ran intelligence operations for the council, activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. Numbers and star charts filled the air, showing the scope of human presence across council space. Red dots marked locations where humans had lived and worked. The display looked like an infection spreading across the galaxy, but Taemin realized with growing alarm that it looked more like a support network. The humans hadn't just lived in random places. They had positioned themselves at critical points. Trade crossroads, frontier worlds where conflicts often started, research stations that served multiple species. We estimate 40 billion humans vanished in a 72-hour window, Dong-su reported. This level of coordination suggests planning that went on for years, possibly decades. They left no trace of their destination, no clues about their intentions, but they also left no damage behind. Power systems on human-operated facilities were properly shut down. Environmental controls were left running for other species. Even the waste recycling systems were programmed to continue working. Hei-in, the research coordinator, added her voice to the growing concern. My teams have been analyzing the abandoned human settlements. They left everything in perfect order. Medical supplies were sorted and labeled for different species' use. Technical manuals were translated into multiple languages. They even left care instructions for the plants in their gardens. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't an angry departure. This wasn't a tantrum or an emotional outburst. The humans had planned this carefully, and they had shown consideration for the worlds and people they were leaving behind. What did we do? Ji-won asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Taemin looked around the chamber at the faces of his colleagues. Fear was beginning to replace confusion. For the first time in any of their lifetimes, they were facing a problem that couldn't be solved with military might, economic pressure, or diplomatic negotiation. An entire species had chosen to leave their civilization behind, and they had done it so quietly and completely that no one knew how to even begin looking for them. We need to understand what we've lost, Taemin said finally. I'm forming a task force to assess the impact of human absence on our civilization. Until we know what we're dealing with, no one makes any major decisions. No one starts any conflicts. And no one stops looking for answers. As the council members filed out of the chamber, Taemin remained behind, staring at the holographic display that still showed the red dots marking human settlements. 40 billion people. Gone without a word. And somehow, despite their relatively small numbers compared to other species, their absence already felt like a hole in the heart of galactic civilization. Outside the windows, the space lanes seemed quieter. The great dance of ships that connected thousands of worlds looked somehow incomplete. 3 weeks had passed since the humans vanished, and the reports on Dong-su's desk grew thicker each day. As intelligence director for Task Force Omega, he had seen classified information that would terrify most council members. But nothing had prepared him for what his teams were discovering about human involvement in galactic civilization. The war room on level 47 of Station Nexus 7 buzzed with activity as specialists from dozens of worlds worked through the night. Holographic displays showed trade routes, military positions, diplomatic records, and economic data. Every screen told the same story. The humans hadn't just participated in galactic society. They had been holding it together. Ye-jin stood before the largest display, her small frame dwarfed by the massive star charts floating in the air around her. As economic analyst for the Kepler Financial Consortium, she understood trade flows better than anyone in council space. But the numbers she was seeing made no sense. 60%, she announced to the assembled team. Her voice was steady, but Dong-su could see her hands shaking. Human-operated trade routes carried 60% of all intersector commerce. Not 40%, not 50%, 60%. Minho, the grizzled military strategist from the Outer Rim Defense Force, looked up from his own reports with disbelief. That's impossible. Humans only made up 8% of the galactic population. I thought so too, Yejin replied. So, I dug deeper. It turns out humans weren't just running their own trade operations. They were working for other species as navigators, cargo handlers, route planners, and safety coordinators. They took the dangerous routes other species wouldn't risk. They mapped new passages through asteroid fields and nebulas. They figured out how to carry Zephyrian atmospheric processors through Vrek space without triggering territorial disputes. She touched a control, and the display zoomed in on the Andromeda's trade route. This route connects 17 major systems and carries medical supplies to the frontier worlds. Every ship that used this passage employed at least one human navigator, not because they had to, but because humans were the only ones willing to fly through the radiation storms near the binary stars. Dongsu studied the data with growing alarm. What's the status of that route now? Closed, Yejin said simply. No one else knows how to navigate it safely. 3 ships have tried in the past week. 1 turned back. 1 is missing. 1 made it through, but with severe radiation damage to their crew. Young-Soo looked up from his cultural analysis station. His people specialized in understanding how different species interacted, but even he seemed shocked by what he was finding. It's not just trade routes, he said. I've been reviewing diplomatic records. Humans were the primary mediators in 847 interspecies disputes over the past 50 years. 847, Dongsu repeated. That's impossible. The Council only handled maybe 200 official disputes in that time. That's just it, Young-Soo explained. These weren't official Council matters. Humans were resolving conflicts before they became big enough for the Council to notice. Border disagreements between mining colonies, cultural misunderstandings, at mixed species research stations, trade disputes that could have led to wars. He activated his own display, showing a web of connections between different worlds and species. Look at this. The Crimson Nebula incident 3 years ago. The Council records show it as a minor territorial dispute that was resolved peacefully. But the real story is here. He highlighted a section of the display. 2 human traders named Kangmin and Hana spent 6 months shuttling between Vrex and Zephyrian colonies, organizing cultural exchange programs for their children. By the time the official negotiators arrived, the colonists were already working together on joint mining operations. Minho set down his military reports with a heavy sigh. The defense implications are even worse, he said. Humans made up 8% of the population but contributed to 34% of our defensive capabilities, and I'm not talking about their numbers. I'm talking about their tactics, their innovations, their willingness to fight in conditions other species avoided. He pulled up battle records from the recent border conflicts with the Outer Rim pirates. The Battle of Kepler Station. Council. Forces were losing badly until a human tactical advisor named Sung Jun suggested using the station's gravity generators as weapons. The Siege of New Harmony. We held that world because a human engineer named Dalmi figured out how to convert atmospheric processors into shield generators. They thought like the enemy, Minho continued. Other species fight the way their culture tells them to fight. Vrex charge straight ahead with overwhelming force. Zephyrians use stealth and hit-and-run tactics. Crystalline hegemony forces rely on superior technology and defensive positions. But humans, they studied every enemy, learned how they thought, and found ways to turn their own strategies against them. Heian, the research coordinator, had been quietly working at her station throughout the discussion. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I think I've found something worse, she said. The room fell silent. Heian was known for her calm, methodical approach to research. If something scared her, it was worth paying attention to. I've been analyzing technological advancement rates across all council species over the past century, she said. Human innovations account for 42% of all major technological advances in that time period. That's not possible, Dongsu said. Humans were barely spacefaring a century ago. Not human-only innovations, Heian clarified. Human-influenced innovations. Joint research projects where humans were involved. Technologies that were improved or adapted based on human suggestions. Medical techniques that humans helped develop for treating other species. She brought up a new display showing a timeline of technological progress. Look at this. Agricultural efficiency improvements that helped solve food shortages on 12 worlds. Medical treatments for cross-species diseases that only human doctors seemed able to diagnose. Environmental restoration techniques that humans shared freely with any world that needed them. Young-Soo leaned forward in his chair. Shared freely? That's the strange part, Hei-In continued. Most of these innovations were never patented through council systems. Humans just gave them away. They'd develop something useful. Publish the research openly, and ask only that other species pay it forward by helping others when they could. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Dong-Soo looked around the room at his team of experts, all of them staring at data that painted the same disturbing picture. The humans hadn't just been participants in galactic civilization, they had been its invisible foundation. How long? Dong-Soo asked quietly. How long what? Ye-Jin replied. How long can we survive without them? The question seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet room. On the displays around them, trade routes showed increasing disruption. Military reports detailed escalating conflicts that no one seemed able to contain. Research projects sat abandoned without human partners who understood how to bridge the gap between different species' approaches to science. Minho was the first to break the silence. 3 border conflicts have already escalated beyond our ability to contain them, he said. The Vrex Dominion is mobilizing fleet elements for what they're calling defensive preparations. 2 mining cartels in the Outer Rim are shooting at each other over territory that used to be managed by human mediators. Ye-Jin nodded grimly. Supply shortages are appearing on 47 worlds, not because we don't have the resources, but because no one knows how to transport them safely through the routes humans use to manage. And the research networks are falling apart, Hei-In added. Collaborative projects between species are failing because humans were often the ones who translated not just languages, but ways of thinking. They helped Vrex engineers understand Zephyrian environmental concerns. They explained crystalline mathematics to Althurian physicists. Dong-Soo stood and walked to the main display, studying the galaxy-wide view of human settlement points. Each red dot had marked a place where humans lived and worked, but now he could see them for what they really were. Support nodes. Critical. Connection points that held galactic civilization together. We need to brief the council, he said finally. But first, we need to answer Speaker Taemin's question. How long can we survive without them? Young-Soo pulled up economic projections on his screen. Based on current trends, we'll see complete trade route collapse in major sectors within 6 months, food shortages on frontier worlds within 4 months, medical supply disruptions within 2 months. Military situation is worse, Minho added. Without human tactical support and mediation, I estimate we'll have full-scale war in at least 3 sectors within 8 weeks. Hei-In looked up from her research station with tears in her large eyes. We're not just losing their help, she said quietly. We're losing the knowledge they shared. Medical techniques that took decades to develop. Environmental restoration methods that could save dying worlds. And we never bothered to learn how they did it. We just let them do it for us. Dong-Soo felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. The humans had been gone for 3 weeks, and galactic civilization was already beginning to unravel. 6 months after the humans disappeared, Jae-Sung stood in the command center of the search vessel, Eternal Hope, and stared at another empty star system. As search coordinator for Project Homecoming, he had overseen the largest search operation in galactic history. 10,000 ships, 200,000 volunteers from 50 different species, the most advanced scanning technology ever assembled, and they had found nothing. Final scan complete on the Ross 128 system, reported his navigation officer, a young Zephyrian named Inji whose blue skin had faded to a pale gray from months of disappointment. No human settlements, no ships, no energy signatures, no debris fields, nothing. Jae-Sung rubbed his tired eyes with his 4-fingered hands. This had been their most promising lead in weeks. Long-range sensors had detected unusual energy readings from this system, and the Council had hoped they might finally have found where the humans had gone. But like every other system they had searched, Ross 128 was empty. That's system number 4847, said Da Yun from her research station. The xenobiologist had joined the search mission to study abandoned human settlements, but the work was taking its toll on her. Her normally bright purple hair had turned almost white from stress. We've searched every system within 500 light years of the last known human positions. We've followed every possible trajectory their ships could have taken. We've investigated every uncharted region that long-range scanners could reach, and found exactly nothing, Jae-sung muttered. He had been confident when Project Homecoming began. How hard could it be to find 40 billion people and their ships? But the humans had vanished as completely as if they had never existed. Not exactly nothing, Da-un corrected quietly. We've found their settlements. We've learned things about them we never knew. She was right about that. The abandoned human colonies had revealed surprising truths about the missing species. Da-yun's teams had studied dozens of former human worlds, and each one told the same story. The humans had left everything in perfect order. Power systems were shut down safely, but backup generators were left running to maintain life support for any species that might need shelter. Medical facilities were stocked with supplies and equipment, calibrated for treating dozens of different alien physiologies. Even the waste recycling systems were programmed to continue working for years without maintenance. They cared about what happened after they left, Da-un had reported to the council. They didn't just abandon these worlds. They prepared them for others to use. The strangest discovery had been the gardens. Nearly every human settlement had extensive food gardens, and the humans had left detailed care instructions written in the languages of every species that might find them. Some gardens were specifically designed to grow food that other species could eat. Others contained medicinal plants used to treat alien diseases. They were still thinking about helping others even as they were leaving, Da-un had told Jae-sung. What kind of species does that? Now, sitting in the empty Ross Wonder 28 system, Jae-sung was beginning to wonder if they would ever find the answer to that question. The humans had planned their departure so carefully that they seemed to have anticipated every possible way they might be tracked. "Sir," called Woo Jin from the communication station. The young officer had been monitoring long-range communications arrays for any sign of human transmissions. "I'm picking up something unusual." Jae-sung moved quickly to the communications station. After months of disappointment, any unusual reading was worth investigating. "What do you have?" "It's not a message," Woo Jin said, his tentacles dancing over the control panels as he fine-tuned the reception equipment. "It's data, hidden in the cosmic background radiation. I almost missed it because it's so faint, but there's definitely a pattern here." He routed the signal to the main display, where waves of information scrolled across the screen in patterns that looked almost random. But Jae-sung had spent his career in communications, and he could see the underlying structure. "This is surveillance data," he said with growing excitement. "Information about ship movements, energy signatures, communication intercepts." He paused as the implications hit him. "Someone is watching Council space. Someone is monitoring everything that happens in our territory." "The humans?" Inji asked hopefully. "Maybe," Jae-sung said. "Woo Jin, can you trace the source of this signal?" The communications officer worked for several hours, using every trick he had learned in 20 years of deep space operations. Finally, he looked up with a confused expression. "I've got coordinates," he said, "but they don't make sense." "Show me," Jae-sung ordered. The star chart that appeared on the main display showed a region of space that every species' navigation charts marked with warning symbols. Radiation storms, quantum anomalies, gravitational fields that could tear a ship apart. It was a vast area of space that all civilized species avoided. "The Forbidden Zone," Da-un whispered. "No one goes there. No one can survive there." "Apparently, someone can," Jae-sung said grimly. "And they're watching us." He turned to his crew. "Set course for those coordinates. Maximum speed." "Sir," Inji protested, "the navigation computers won't even calculate a safe route through that region. The quantum storms alone would destroy our shields in minutes." "Then we'll have to figure out a way to survive them," Jae-sung replied, "because that's where our answers are." It took 2 weeks to reach the edge of the Forbidden Zone, and another week to develop shield modifications that might protect them from the worst of the radiation. Jae-sung's ship was equipped with the most advanced technology the Council could provide, but even their best estimates gave them only a 50% chance of surviving the journey. "Are you sure about this?" Daon asked, as they prepared to enter the storm-racked region. "We could send unmanned probes first." "We've tried that," Jae-sung reminded her. "Every probe we've sent into deep space has been destroyed or disappeared. If we want answers, we have to go ourselves." The journey through the Forbidden Zone was unlike anything any of them had experienced. Space itself seemed to twist and bend around them. Energy storms that glowed with impossible colors lashed their shields. Gravitational anomalies pulled their ship in directions that didn't exist in normal space. But they pressed on, following the signal source deeper into the chaos. And finally, after 3 days of navigating through cosmic hell, they found something that shouldn't have existed. A space station, massive beyond anything the Council had ever built. It hung in the center of a relatively stable pocket of space, surrounded by a network of defensive satellites and scanning arrays. Energy readings showed that it was not only functional, but thriving. "How is this possible?" Inji breathed. "Nothing could survive here. The radiation alone should have killed any living thing within light years. Unless they found a way to make it survivable," Da-un said quietly. "Unless they learned to live in places no one else could." Jae-sung opened communication channels and transmitted a standard peaceful contact message. The response came immediately, in perfect Council standard language. "Unknown vessel, you have entered restricted space. State your purpose." The voice was human. "This is Council Search Vessel Eternal Hope," Jae-sung replied, his heart racing. "We're looking for missing human populations. We know you're monitoring Council space. We need to talk." There was a long pause. Then, "You should not have come here. Your ship is not designed to survive in this region. Your crew is already showing signs of radiation poisoning." Dayun checked her medical scanners and paled. The human was right. Despite their shields, the exotic energies of the Forbidden Zone were slowly killing them. "We'll leave if necessary," Jae-sung said. "But first we need answers. Where did the humans go? Why did they leave? What do you want from us?" Another pause. "Your questions have answers, but not ones you will like, and you will not live long. Enough to deliver them unless you accept our help." "What kind of help?" "We're transmitting docking coordinates. Our medical facilities can treat radiation poisoning that would kill you in normal space. But understand this. If you dock with this station, you will learn things that will change how you see the galaxy forever." Jae-sung looked around at his crew. They were good people who had volunteered for a dangerous mission because they believed in finding the truth. They deserved to know what they were choosing. "The Council needs to know what happened to the humans," he said finally. "Whatever the cost." The docking procedure was unlike anything in Council protocols. The human station used technology that seemed impossible, guiding their ship through energy fields that should have been deadly and into a docking bay that existed in multiple dimensions at once. As they prepared to disembark, Jae-sung sent one final message to Council space. "We have found the humans. They built something incredible here. If we don't return, know that they didn't leave because they were angry. They left because they found something bigger." The transmission was never received. By the time it reached Council space, it was just noise lost in cosmic background radiation. But in the docking bay of an impossible station in the heart of the Forbidden Zone, 12 brave souls were about to learn the truth about humanity's disappearance. And that truth would either save galactic civilization or destroy it forever. 1 year after the humans vanished, Council Emergency Manager Yoon-ji stood before a chamber that looked nothing like the orderly assembly that had once governed galactic civilization. Half the seats were empty. The representatives who remained looked exhausted, desperate, and afraid. Outside the great windows of Station Nexus 7, the space lanes that had once bustled with peaceful trade now carried warships and refugee vessels. "The situation has moved beyond crisis," Yoon-ji announced, her voice echoing in the half-empty chamber. "We are witnessing the complete breakdown of galactic civilization." She activated the holographic display that dominated the center of the chamber. Red zones spread across the star map like an infection, marking regions where warfare had erupted or governments had collapsed. The peaceful blue areas that represented stable Council territory had shrunk to less than half their original size. Byung-ho, of the Vrex dominion sat in his usual place, but his proud bearing had been replaced by something that looked almost like shame. His red scales had lost their shine, and his voice carried none of its former authority when he spoke. "The hegemony wars were not supposed to happen this way," he said quietly. "My military advisors assured me that without human tactical support, the other species would be easy to defeat. We were wrong. Without human mediators, every conflict has spiraled out of control." The Vrex invasion of 3 neighboring systems had been the spark that ignited the galactic powder keg. But what should have been a quick territorial expansion had turned into a nightmare of endless warfare. Other species had formed defensive alliances. Ancient grudges had resurfaced. Trade had collapsed as worlds chose sides or simply tried to survive. 17 active war zones, reported military analyst Kyung-sik from his position near the display. 43 worlds under siege, over 2 billion refugees in need of food, shelter, and medical care, and we no longer have the logistical networks to help them. Jung-ho, the sociologist who studied interspecies relations, stood slowly from his seat. His people, the Harmony Builders, had always been known for their calm wisdom, but even his composed demeanor showed cracks of strain. "The cultural breakdown may be even worse than the military situation," he said. "I've been documenting the collapse of interspecies cooperation programs. Children who grew up together in human-administered schools are now enemies because their governments are at war. Cultural exchange programs that had created friendships across species lines have been canceled. Even scientific research collaborations have ended as species retreat into isolation." He gestured to a section of the display, showing social connectivity maps. "Look at this. 5 years ago, these lines showed thousands of connections between species. Shared festivals, educational exchanges, joint research projects, cultural celebrations. The humans created and managed most of these programs, but we thought they happened naturally." The map showed the connections fading like dying stars. Where, once there had been a web of relationships linking different worlds and cultures, now there were only isolated clusters of single-species groups. "We're becoming strangers to each other again," Jung-ho continued. "The humans somehow kept us talking to each other, kept us seeing each other as people rather than just aliens. Without them, we're falling back into the old patterns of fear and mistrust." Sun Ki, the leader of Archaeological Team 7, had requested permission to address the council about a discovery his team had made. Now he stood nervously before the assembly, holding a datapad that contained information that would shock them all. "My team was investigating the abandoned human research station at Kepler 186, he began. "We found classified files that had been left behind, apparently by accident. The information contained in these files explains a great deal about what we've lost." He transmitted the data to the chamber's main display. "This is a document titled Council Species Integration Analysis, Classified. It was written by a human named K. Martinez 3 years before the humans disappeared." The display filled with detailed psychological profiles of every council species, social structures, conflict triggers, cultural blind spots, methods for avoiding interspecies disputes. The analysis was incredibly detailed and showed a level of understanding that went far beyond what any species had about the others. "The humans had been studying us," Sun Ki explained, "not to control us or manipulate us, but to understand how to help us work together. They identified the specific types of misunderstandings that led to conflicts between different species. They developed strategies for preventing those misunderstandings before they could cause problems." Tae Min, who had been listening in growing amazement, leaned forward in his chair. "This document? It's like a manual for managing galactic civilization." "That's exactly what it is," Sun Ki confirmed. "And there are hundreds of similar documents, strategic plans for preventing conflicts, cultural bridge-building programs, designed specifically for different species combinations, even economic policies designed to prevent the kind of resource competition that leads to war." The implications were staggering. The humans hadn't just been participants in galactic civilization. They had been its architects, carefully managing the complex relationships between species that barely understood each other. In Su, the chief medical officer for the Council's health services, added his own disturbing findings. "The medical crisis is equally severe," he reported. For 50 years, human doctors had been developing treatments for cross-species diseases and conditions that our own medical specialists couldn't even diagnose. He brought up medical records on the display. Human doctors were treating Vrek's genetic disorders using techniques that combined Arthurian regenerative medicine with Zephyrian biochemistry. They developed surgical procedures that worked on multiple species types. They even created diagnostic tools that could identify diseases that jumped between species. Cross-species medicine was almost entirely a human innovation, Insu continued. They studied every species' biology and found ways to adapt treatments between different physiologies. Without them, we're seeing medical emergencies across the galaxy as species lose access to treatments that only human doctors understood. The chamber fell into a heavy silence as the representatives absorbed the full scope of what they had lost. The humans hadn't just been neighbors or trading partners. They had been the invisible foundation that held galactic civilization together. Tai Min stood slowly, his tall frame casting long shadows in the dimmed chamber lights. "We need to face the truth," he said. "The humans didn't leave because they were angry with us. They didn't leave because of any specific conflict or dispute. They left because—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Because they found something better than what we had to offer." He looked around at the assembled representatives, seeing his own fears reflected in their faces. "For decades, we thought we were partners with humanity. But we weren't. We were their patients, their students, their children in a sense. They were taking care of us, and we never even realized it." The truth hung in the air like a toxic cloud. 40 billion humans had quietly managed the health, prosperity, and peace of galactic civilization. They had prevented wars, facilitated trade, enabled cooperation, and shared technology freely. And they had done it all so subtly that no one had noticed until they were gone. "What do we do now?" asked Ji-Wan of the Ethereal Collective, her translucent form flickering with distress. Tai-Min looked at the star map showing the spreading zones of conflict and collapse. "We learn," he said finally. "We study what the humans left behind. We try to understand how they held everything together. And we pray that we can figure it out before our civilization destroys itself." He activated the chamber's communication system and prepared to broadcast a message across council space. "Citizens of the galaxy," he began, "the council formally recognizes the contributions of humanity to our civilization. We acknowledge that their presence made us better than we are alone, and we extend an open invitation. If any humans are listening, you are welcome to return. No questions asked, no demands made. We need you." The message was transmitted to every inhabited world in council space. It was broadcast on every frequency. It was repeated in every known language. The response was immediate and heartbreaking. Silence. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the humans were listening. But they were not ready to come home to a civilization that had only learned to appreciate them after they were gone. 18 months after the humans disappeared, the emergency alarms in council chambers had become as common as morning announcements. But this time was different. Instead of another report about war or economic collapse, the alarms signaled something. That made Tai-Min's heart race with hope and terror in equal measure. A human ship had arrived at Station Nexus 7. Security Chief Wanbin rushed into the council speaker's office without ceremony, his breathing heavy from running through the station corridors. "Sir, you need to see this. The ship that just docked. It's not like anything in our databases." Tai-Min followed Wanbin to the observation deck overlooking the main docking bays. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the human vessel. It was sleek and elegant, built with technology that made the most advanced council ships look like primitive toys. Energy fields shimmered around its hull in patterns that suggested defensive systems beyond anything in known space. "Who came? Off the ship?" Tai-Min asked. "Just one person," Wanbin replied. "She asked to speak to the full council immediately. Says her name is Dr. Ha-Na Kim, former human ambassador to the council." Tai-Min recognized the name. Dr. Kim had been one of the most respected diplomats in council history, known for her ability to find peaceful solutions to seemingly impossible conflicts. She had supposedly left with the rest of her species during the silent departure. "Get everyone to the chambers," Tai-Min ordered. "Emergency session. Full attendance required." Within an hour, the great chamber of Station Nexus 7 was fuller than It had been in months. Representatives who had been away managing crisis in their home systems had returned quickly when they heard that a human had come back. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as species that had been at war with each other sat side by side, united in their desperate hope for answers. Dr. Hana Kim entered the chamber alone, walking with the calm confidence that Tai Min remembered from her diplomatic days. She appeared unchanged, still looking exactly as she had 18 months ago when she had vanished with the rest of her species. But there was something different in her eyes, a depth of knowledge that seemed to stretch beyond the stars. She took her place at the central speaking platform and looked around at the assembled representatives. When she spoke, her voice carried easily through the chamber, but there was a weight to her words that demanded attention. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," she began, "I come before you today to reveal truths that will change your understanding of everything you thought you knew about the universe." The chamber fell silent. After months of searching, fighting, and struggling with the collapse of their civilization, they were finally going to get answers. "For the past 18 months, you have wondered why humanity left your civilization," Dr. Kim continued. "You have assumed we departed because of anger, frustration, or some grievance against the Council. You were wrong. We left because we received an invitation from a civilization that spans galaxies and has been watching our development for centuries." She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. Images appeared of structures so vast and beautiful that several representatives gasped in amazement. Cities that floated between stars, ships the size of moons, technology that seemed to blend science with art in ways that defied understanding. "They call themselves the architects," Dr. Kim explained. "They are the builders of a galactic community that stretches across multiple galaxies and encompasses millions of species. But they do not expand through conquest or force. They grow through invitation, asking only those species that prove themselves worthy to join their greater community." Chang Min, the Council's technical advisor, leaned forward in his seat. "Worthy of what?" "Worthy of the responsibility that comes with great power," Dr. Kim replied. "The architects have technology that could revolutionize existence itself. They can create energy from nothing. They can heal any injury or disease. They can make any world into a paradise. But they only share these gifts with species that have proven they will use power to help others rather than to help themselves." She touched a control, and the display changed to show a timeline spanning thousands of years. For centuries, the architects have been watching our galaxy, looking for species that demonstrate the qualities they value: compassion for others, willingness to sacrifice for the greater good, the ability to unite rather than divide. The timeline highlighted moments in human history, acts of kindness between strangers, scientific discoveries shared freely, humans risking their lives to save people they had never met, wars ended through negotiation rather than victory, medical treatments given to enemies. Humans were contacted by the architects decades ago, Dr. Kim continued, not as a species to be recruited immediately, but as one to be tested. Every act of human generosity, every innovation we shared freely, every conflict we mediated between other species, was observed and evaluated. Taemin felt a cold realization spreading through his chest. The test wasn't whether you could help us. The test was whether we would help you, Dr. Kim confirmed, and whether we would continue helping you even when we could have taken advantage instead. The test was whether we could leave you better than we found you. She gestured to the assembled representatives, many of whom looked stunned by the implications. For 50 years, humanity served as caregivers for galactic civilization. We prevented your wars, facilitated your trade, shared our discoveries, and asked for nothing in return except the opportunity to help. We were testing whether power could be used responsibly. Changmin stood slowly from his seat. "And you passed the test." "We did," Dr. Kim replied. "And as a reward, we were invited to join the architects' community, to learn technologies that could transform not just our own species, but every species we encounter, to become builders of worlds and healers of civilizations." She produced a small device from her robes and activated it. Instantly, the chamber was filled with detailed technical specifications. energy production methods that could power entire star systems, medical techniques that could extend lifespans indefinitely, terraforming technologies that could make any world habitable within months. These are gifts from the architects, Dr. Kim explained. Technologies that could solve every problem your civilization faces, end your wars, cure your diseases, feed your hungry worlds, restore your dying planets. The representatives stared at the technical data with growing amazement and hope. But Dr. Kim's next words brought them back to harsh reality. However, these technologies can only be maintained and used responsibly by species that have proven they can handle such power. The architects will not share their gifts with civilizations that turn tools into weapons, healing into harm, or knowledge into control. She looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who represented species that had been at war with each other for over a year. The question now is whether you are ready for the same test that humanity faced. Will you use what we offer to help others or to help yourselves? Will you share it freely or hoard it? Will you build bridges between your species or use it to build walls? Byung-ho of the Vrex Dominion, who had started the Hegemony Wars, stood with obvious difficulty. His proud warrior bearing was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. What must we do to prove ourselves worthy? Learn to work together, Dr. Kim replied simply. End your wars not through victory, but through understanding. Share resources not because you have to, but because others need them. Make decisions based on what helps everyone, not just your own people. She prepared to leave, but Tae-min called out desperately, "Will you come back? Will humanity return to help us?" Dr. Kim paused at the chamber entrance and turned back to face them. "That depends on you," she said. "When we left, you barely noticed our contributions until things started falling apart. When we return, if we return, it should be because you want partners, not because you need caretakers." Her words echoed in the sudden silence of the chamber. "We're not coming back to fix your problems. We'll come back to help you fix them yourselves. The choice is yours." She walked toward the exit, then stopped one final time. "The architect's invitation is extended to all species that prove themselves worthy. The test begins now. Show us, and them, what you can become when you choose to be better than you are." The human ship departed from Station Nexus 7 that same day, leaving behind the technological gifts and a simple message broadcast to every world in Council space. The path to the stars is open to all who choose to walk it together. In the months that followed, something remarkable happened. Species that had been at war began talking instead of fighting. Resources were shared between worlds that had never trusted each other. The technologies left by Dr. Kim were studied, maintained, and improved through cooperation between former enemies. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and failures. Some species tried to hoard the new technologies for themselves and found that they simply stopped working. Others attempted to weaponize the healing devices and discovered they had been designed to help, not harm. But slowly, gradually, the Council learned what the humans had been trying to teach them all along. That true strength came not from what you could take, but from what you could give.